Martine Franck was Cartier-Bresson's second wife, so naturally, in one way or another, her name was always associated with her husband's. And it's believed that she was put a bit in the shadow of her husband in terms of their photography careers. And so today we're going to be talking about fluidity, but also geometry in photography, amongst many other things. So welcome back to another video. I'm glad to have you here. Sit down, relax, grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's discover the photography of Martine Franck.
I would like to moan for a while.
And according to what I read, Martine Franck came from a wealthier background. Her father was a banker and also an art collector, which provided his daughter with extensive contact to the art world by frequenting museums, galleries, and she also frequented a boarding school where she studied art history. And in a way, this background isn't very different from her husband's Cartier-Bresson, whose well-to-do family also provided him with good opportunities and funded his traveling and earlier photographic ventures. And much like Cartier-Bresson, Martine Franck's photography career started following trips to the Far East, which happened in 1963, and it would be in Japan where she met her friend who was coincidentally the director and founder of the Théâtre du Soleil, and together they traveled across countries. And it would be in Nepal that Franck was seized by the desire of photographing the world around her. And it was during this trip that she started photographing in black and white, which would be a style that she would keep throughout her career. And upon returning to France in 1964, Franck became an assistant to photographers at Time Life, a popular magazine at the time. And by 1969, she was already a freelance photographer in her own right, working for various publications like Vogue or Sports Illustrated, as well as, of course, for the Théâtre du Soleil, being the company's official photographer for 48 years. She co-founded her own photo agency called Viva in 1972, and in 1983 she became a member of Magnum Photos. And still in 1983 she began working for the French Ministry of Women's Rights and later on for non-profit groups dedicated to help the poor. Still in 1983 she began working for the French Ministry of Women's Rights and later on for non-profit groups dedicated to helping the poor and disadvantaged. And now that we know a little bit more about the world of Martine Franck, I do have to say though, before we dive into her most notable photos and take lessons from them, as we usually do with every photographer here on the channel, I do have a note to make, and that is that Martine Franck, despite, in spite or not of being married to Cartier-Bresson, she was a very good photographer in her own right. Her photos are very good photos. She did a lot. That's why I did the note before this on her career and the things that she achieved by herself. And I feel like obviously her name will always be associated to Cartier-Bresson's. She, in fact, was the founder of Cartier-Bresson's Foundation. And so I feel like, obviously her name is tied to his, but she had her own career. And she was a very good photographer in her own right. I do feel like, obviously, in their relationship, they might have helped each other. Who wouldn't, feedback, etc. I know she became a member of Magnum Photos in the 1980s, a full member in 1983. And so obviously that would help her career. But I feel like despite of that, she was very good in her own right. And so here we are today to cast a light on her images. And talking about that, I have an image to show you, and that is an image, a very popular image that if you Google her name, you'll probably see, amongst the first results. And that is a photo that she took in 1976 in Provence of these baiters by the pool. And this photo is an example of a great quality of the photographer that to me is perceiving the fluidity and movement in photography. And although she had a good sense of geometry, which we're going to talk about in a minute, I believe that to me she's able to see beyond the static placement of things and rather focuses on the perspectives and movements created within the scenes she photographs. And I might risk to say that perhaps her background helped form this quality of her photographic eye, since fluidity is a word that I would personally associate with painting, with the movement of paintbrushes, with the mixing of tones. And so all that earlier contact with art and painting possibly helped her developing this skill, but also the fact that she photographed the Théâtre du Soleil for so long with their shows, rehearsals, and the performers. And so the dramatics of the scene might have helped her perceiving the dramatics in other situations in life. And the more I look at her photos, the more I identify this quality of capturing movement in an elegant and graceful manner. So when we look at her photographs, we definitely can learn about dramatism, we can learn about fluidity, and we can learn, of course, about capturing movement through photography. However, another thing I found super interesting about Martine Franck's photography is that even amidst all this movement, she chooses to arrange her frame, obeying the different geometric forms, which to me reveals yet another thing that we can learn with her photography. And that is learning about geometry in photography or the geometry of the shot. And I think in her case, her photography is not very rigid, precisely due to the movement or the illusion of movement that she captures with her photos, but it's still something that I would associate with her style. And so several of her photos showcase an arrangement of the geometrics of the scene, verticals, horizontals, diagonals. And if we pay attention, we can see that the lines formed by these geometric forms are sometimes what leads us to the point of interest or an horizon point, which then guides our eyes through the picture. And this can be a great tip to help us in our own compositions and in the growth of our own photographic eye. A good sense of geometry. And I think a good exercise here is to look at certain photographers besides Martine Franck, of course. And I think I could recommend André Kertész as well. And you can basically look at their pictures and break down and see for yourself their use of geometry and their great sense of arranging the frame around these forms and how these forms create shadows and then add contrasts and add something more to the texture of the scene. And composition is something we've explored here on the channel. And if you're interested in learning about more, composition techniques, there's a video right here, or right here if you want some tips to grow your photographic voice. And with that being said, it's been all for today. Stay safe, keep shooting, and I'm out. Peace.